That's right. It started in the summer of '96, just after we'd come off the road. We'd finished the Montreux Jazz Festival, which was the last show we did, and I went almost immediately into Whitfield Street, the old Columbia Studios in London, and with most of the band that I originally had on the road, we went in and started to record what was my idea to be a virtually live album of covers. And I really wanted to get that kind of sort of band sound in a room. The only problem with it was that we'd not actually spent any time rehearsing or doing demos. And so effectively, I realised now in hindsight that we were really making demos for this album. The two songs that came from that first session were Ghetto Girl and High Fives. It was reasonably successful, but I would describe it as a very expensive way of making demos, you know. I had a little bit of time to think about who I wanted to work with production-wise, because it was a very traumatic year for me last year. My manager resigned. I decided sort of midway through the tour that I was not going to work with some of the people that I'd worked with for a long time. I knew that I was going to do something different, which is again why I agreed to release the greatest hits, because I just knew that it wasn't going to be like that anymore. I bought a new house in the country, and it enabled me to spend a little time in solitude, really, to just kind of think about what I wanted to do with my career, and also, more importantly, what I wanted to do with the music. And that was really when I started working out. And while I was trying to work all this out, everything else was going off. You know, like my manager was resigning, and I just wasn't going to work with these guys again. I'd realised that I'd had a long-standing affair with somebody that had come to an end, and I'd made a huge mistake, and I shouldn't really have ended it. So all that year was kind of working all that out while all this was happening. And it's really kind of why it's called Blue, is that the whole of last year was a difficult year. And then to cap it all at the end of the summer, we all suffered the tragedy of Princess Diana, and even people that probably didn't like her will have been moved by that. I think it just affected the whole world, virtually. And then Mother Teresa as well, like in the same week. It was just like, oh, this is a blue year, you know. And the thing is, the best part of it for me was that the album is like a kind of a coming through phase. It's not something that's just blue and that's the end of it. It's really that there is light at the end of the tunnel, that there is a way through, and that as you come through a difficult time, you come out of it a much stronger person, and a much less world-weary person, but somebody that can look to the future and see that throughout all your difficulties and all your tragedies, that there is always light at the end of it, you know. And I think in many songs that sentiment is kind of represented. There's two extremely underrated albums by Neil Young that I think are so real and so emotionally felt that I used to play the death out of them when I was about 18. Around the time that I wrote Holding Back the Years, actually, I was listening a lot to an album called On the Beach by Neil Young, not Chris Rea, and Tonight's the Night. These two albums are kind of like brother and sister album for him, and it probably is his least commercially successful records, but they have such a realism to them and such a kind of a blueness, in fact, you know, that I used to play them before I go to sleep at night in the dark, you know, and it'd send me off to sleep, and I used to do it a lot. So that song, Mellow My Mind, has been with me for a long time. And it's the same really with The Air That I Breathe. I've chosen these songs because they mean a lot to me. And I guess some people could say that The Air That I Breathe was a kind of an obvious choice. But I decided to be bullheaded about that and just thought, well, I don't care if it's an obvious choice. I'm going to make it mine. On a personal note, I think sometimes that generally the media and perhaps put far too much emphasis on, you know, whether it's a cover or whether it's an original. If you consider yourself first and foremost a singer, what you're doing is that you're representing a lyric. You're singing that song because you love that song, and it should be irrelevant as to whether or not I wrote it or I didn't. I mean, before the Beatles, it was the norm that a singer did not write the song. So, you know, we don't always have to just keep following the same rules in how we deal with things, you know. I consider myself a songwriter second to being a singer, and almost have a duty to perform other people's songs because it's another view of the world, and there's many other people living in the world apart from yourself, you know, and so to get another vision of it, I think is enriching and rewarding for a singer to do that. The reality is, if you're going to run a successful band in the traditional kind of Beatles sense, you have to have equal contributions from those members in the band. If you don't have those equal contributions, there isn't in any walk of life that you consider yourself as equals. If I emerge as the principal songwriter, the singer of the band, then inevitably not only the fans but the media and everyone else is going to extricate you from that unit. Now, if you look at the Beatles, you had John, one of the greatest writers of all time, Paul, one of the greatest writers of all time, George, a fantastic songwriter who wrote something, and Ringo even wrote a couple of songs, you know. So there's a kind of a tension there, I know, but at the same time there's a kind of thing that bonds them and gives them a mutual respect where you think that each one of you is putting the same amount in. When people are at a job of work and something, or they've got a dynamic team, they expect everyone to pull their finger out and deliver the goods. And that is exactly the same inside a musical unit. And for those people who don't take that attitude, then you've got to move on, you know. And what I have now with these two guys is that we have a mutual respect where I know that they're as valuable as they can be, really, and in a sense that is a kind of a band. But I just refuse now to deal with these notions of like the whole world has to be like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. I would just ask people to be a little bit more open-minded, you know. You look at bands like Massive Attack, they flow and things happen. They're more like a musical project, like Soul to Soul were originally. So, you know, there's a lot of ways of keeping a unit together. Well, I see it as a group thing in terms of contributions from the musicians. It didn't happen for Simply Red in the sense that we didn't have another principal writer in the band. I think if there would have been another principal writer, or perhaps if I was the bass player and there'd been a singer there that was a great singer, then we would have had like a mutual respect of like going, well, I need him and he needs me, you know. And it really is about needing to make a great sound. And if you don't really need somebody there, then what are they doing there? I love music for this. It's an incredibly complicated and competitive, I can't even call it business. It's almost like a competition in the air, you know, as to what sound is going to appeal to people. What sound are they going to hear on the radio and go, that's how I feel right now. That's really captured how I feel right now. And that's the competition, is capturing that feeling of people and capturing their imaginations. And to do that, you need commitment. You need people around you who want the same thing, who are like trying to do it, who don't have a hidden agenda or a hidden sort of jealousy or some kind of, you know, creating an atmosphere when you walk into a room. They're like going, we're going to give you 150%. And that's what Andy and Gota have done with me. You know, we work together as a triangle, as a team, and it's a very strong thing right now. And it's been a pleasure doing it because of their sheer commitment. They're as committed as I am. And I think it shows in the recording. I think that compared to the last album, there's a hell of a lot more musical depth and variation in the choice of instrumentation and the choice of sounds, and you really get the sense that like there's been a lot of work put into this. You know, the more you hear it, I just think you hear more and more things going on in the record. That's a good question, because I mean that song in particular was really pretty much formed at the writing stage. You know, the mood was already there, and it was just really about enhancing the mood of the song. Again, the contribution that Andy and Gota make is that they provide a lot more musical voicings than I can, because I'm not principally a musician, I'm a melodic writer. So I will write the melody of the song, the thing that the window cleaner sings, and the lyrics, you know, and then I don't want to do everything by myself. I want other people involved. I always have done, you know. I would never dream of producing a record by myself. And so to get that kind of thing is a really, the way they would enhance it is that they sometimes know me better than I know me. They know what Simply Red sounded like, and I think they had a vision of also what it should sound like. After all, it's 1998, and the last one I did was 1995, and especially this country, the music in this country has really moved on. We've had an incredible series of years with some phenomenal work. Bands like Radiohead and Oasis and The Verve. There's been some great music, you know. So you've got to like look at that and go like, how are we going to be relevant in the way the picture is now compared to where it was before, you know? Obviously, I don't have to worry about money anymore, and I don't really need to justify myself in saying, like, do I need any more hits? In terms of, like, cricket statistics, I don't need any more hits, and I don't need any more number ones. I've had quite enough, thank you very much. But that isn't the point with me. What drives me is the music, and I love communicating with audiences, and Andy and Gota represented me in that way brilliantly. I've always written in a very solitary way. I always write on my own. And like a song on there, Someday in My Life, which just sounds totally like a kind of piano song, was in fact written in the air. I just dictated it into a machine and just sang the melody into the machine. And then we added the piano and the orchestra much later. People would, when they hear that, would probably think, oh, it sounds so much like it was written on the piano. But all the other songs were written on the piano, and I don't even know the chords. I mean, like, I can't even play in that sense. What I do is I literally just sort of find the chords, and that's how I started to write on the piano. The first song I ever wrote on the piano was a song called Wonderland. I wrote that in Holland. I started that melody around the time we did Picture Book. All those years ago, I had that melody for years. And I moved into this house in the summer of 96, and the previous owners very kindly left a piano there. And, you know, I started tinkering about, and then it turned into the music room, and then there was bits of paper and lyrics all over the place, and I was off, you know. And the whole of last year, as difficult as it was an incredibly creative year for my writing, because I've already written the songs for the next album, and I'm off. When I've finished promoting this record, Gota and Andy and I intend just going sort of straight back in and working on what will be the sister album to this, you know, because they were written about the same time. I think it's good that they come out pretty close together and capture a mood of a time that was enormously creative for me. When I did the melody, I was actually thinking of an Italian singer called Mina. They'd asked me to write a song for her, and that song was initially written for her. But I knew I was going to put it on my album because the melody was so strong. And it's very much evoking that kind of era of Cole Porter and sort of George Gershwin. And I actually do wish that Frank wasn't so sick, because I'd love Frank to sing this song, to have sung this song. I hope somehow through some miracle he gets well, you know, and I'll send it to him. When I make a connection with somebody like I have with some of the Jamaican artists like Sly and Robbie, you know, they know I've got soul. They've told me I've got soul. I know I've got soul, and I know I can do it, you know. And we went down into the ghetto to do that. That was recorded in downtown Kingston, and it's as authentic as you get, you know. It's funny that people say that, and I agree. I think it's a relatively faithful version, but you should go and A/B them. I think you get the shock of your life, because what the trick is with covers is that you play it and people think, oh yeah, I know that really well, and that's just as I remember it, right? And then you go back and A/B it. I got the shock of my life when I played the Gregory Isaacs version, because it's about like 10-15 BPM slower, and when you hear it now, it just sounds so slow. I love it, you know, but I still think that I can do some songs in a way and I can go, this is Simply Red. Well, what happened was that this German guy called Moose T did a remix of the Simply Red Fugees' Angel that's on the Greatest Hits. And the groove is just wicked. And the thing was, he'd slowed it down, so he'd time stretched the vocal. and the original Angel song on top of it, I felt like, God, you could put a better song on top of that and make it sound great, really sitting in with the rhythm and, put some additional vocals around it and dress it up and just make it into like a different thing. And I just felt that like in the world of sort of remix or whatever, I said, well, why don't I do a remix or a rewrite of the remix and turn it into sort of like a Groucho Marx, the first part of the first part. And because that's what's happening with music. It's becoming very kind of open and difficult to legislate in a way, but the rules are all getting thrown about, and I really wanted to do something that sat better in the rhythm, and I think I rewrote all the verses and the lyrics in the verses, rewrote the melodies, and then just kept the choruses of the In My Lifes with Lauren on it still from the Fugees, and Sarah and Dee to the girls I work with, and then I did some additional sort of backing vocals and ad-libs throughout the track, to make it different. I love the version now, and I think it's much better than the remix of Angel. Well, we recorded a version of it for their album, but that the Ghetto Girl was the one that came from the original sessions that I did with the London Boys, so a lot of these are sort of like London lads whose parents and grandparents are from the Caribbean, from Jamaica and stuff. So I kind of like the idea of like these second generation, English boys doing like Jamaican reggae, and I did a sort of like, I tried to do like a kind of a Blood and Fire mix of it. We really set up all the spring echoes and all that kind of stuff, and did a great mix of it. Stevie J, who's the musical arms and legs of Puff Daddy, did a remix, and he came up with these ideas, and I just thought, this is so different to the original that it would sound great on the album, especially because, the American record company think that it could do so well in America. What I enjoyed about it was it just added a different dimension to the album. Is that like, now on this album I take people all over the place, and because of that it gives it another dimension. As soon as we walked in the room I just hit it off. We're just like, he's cool, we're gonna have no problems here. Sat down at the desk, sang the song, done, dusted, out to dinner that night, thank you very much, see you later. It was great. Throughout the 60s in my childhood, we had very simple slogans of, we all want to be free. We all want to be free. All you need is love. We all want to be free. And I actually spent a lot of time really trying to understand and think about that. And the way I feel about it now is that I don't think anybody in this earth can ever be free. It's a myth. You can't be free. The reason why you can't be free is because there happen to be other people living on the earth with you. And what I'm saying is that song, you can only really ever have moments where you feel free. And they could be a million different moments. You could be sat there having a cup of coffee in the afternoon on your own and just suddenly go, and just for that split second you feel free. And human beings need that. But to keep searching for this notion of saying freedom, 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 it's a myth. You're never going to get it. Well, one of the added bonuses of being a working class boy is that you can smell BS from about 2,000 metres, and I've been able to do that. I've never really had hanger-on women, like kind of ones that are just after you for your money, because I can smell it from a great distance. All the best relationships that I've had have been completely private. The media really know nothing about my private life, which is great. And I've had some fantastic relationships, really, really funny, tender, close, great relationships, And for a long time I denied taking them any further because I knew I'd be travelling around the world. And I respect people, and I don't want them in tow, and I don't want them sort of following me around like a pet dog. One of the things I love about girls, modern girls now, is that they've got their own lives, they've got their own thing. They're not waiting for you to sort of, they get on and do their thing, and that kind of turns me on. That really drives me. I like that about women. I like that about modern women. And so it's very difficult to sort of, when you're constantly travelling, to expect them to be following you around, because the kind of woman that I like is not going to be into doing that. And that's always been the dilemma and the difficulty, because I've been so committed to that touring. But I've designed it now in a way where I'm not doing that kind of touring probably ever again, to that extent. What I will do in the future, probably in about the year 1999, is to do a series of theatre dates, maybe 20 or 30 throughout the world, and then maybe later on in the year, in the summers, about 10 stadium dates in the world, and that's it. It's because it's so incredibly time consuming. You're effectively saying to me, all right, now you made an album, I want you to give me a year and a half of your life. Forget your private life, because that's not going to happen, you know, and I'm not prepared to do that anymore. I think I deserve a private life, you know, after all this time. So I'm trying to design an open playing field where that can be a possibility. Just to create that is a big deal in itself. To be able to say, oh, if I get involved with somebody now, I can take it further, you know, and there's a reason, there's a future. Whereas before, I always saw like a brick wall of being commitment to my work, and worse, commitment to touring. People only ever see you in the town that they see you in. They never realise that, like, you're doing the same thing 2 months later in Australia or in Brazil or in America, and how much time is involved in doing that. And travelling is awesome. I've been around the world 7 times. I'm not stopping. It's not like saying never say never. It's not like I'm never going to do shows again. But I'm going to do them in a way that stays stimulating for me. And I'm sorry if you can't get a ticket to the theatres, but, you know, just keep your ear to the ground and wait until they get announced, because I'm going smaller because I want to go smaller, because it just has an atmosphere in those smaller theatres, and really tasteful theatres, that you don't get in the sports arenas. And I'm just tired of the sports arena thing, you know. I've done it for 10, 12 years, and it's time to just make a little change. Well, we always look very closely at the running orders. The running order is very important to me, and both to Andy and Gota, and all of us were unanimous, almost automatically. We all knew that Mellow My Mind was going to lead off, and we all knew that High Fives was going to finish it. All we had to do was sort out the bit in the middle, you know, the rest, that was pretty much taken for granted for a long time. We're trying to address that in a slightly different way. I mean, I've already just, in the last 2 weeks, I've actually finished 4 videos. I've made 4 videos in the space of 2 weeks, so that's out of the way now. But in September, we're going to record a series of concerts for TV in a live studio environment. And I think with the state of technology as it is now, with digital TV and digital sound, we can really do something great. And I'm rehearsing up a band for those dates within the next 2 months. So we're going to try and fulfill your question exactly by getting to what will be billions of people through live performances, but live performances down the internet and on TV. That isn't a complete solution to the feeling that you get from a live performance, but it's as best as I can do right now. As I said, especially bearing in mind that I'm going in to record the next album quite quickly. That intimacy will be fulfilled the following year in the theatres. Motivation and music, to me, are almost the same word. Music motivates me, and it doesn't even seem to drain the energy. What drains the energy is the airports, the hotels. That, you know, as wonderful as the hotels are, they're not your home, you know. And it's little things like that that tend to be more exhausting. When I actually tread the boards in a thespian sense, you're transported into a different world. I love that. I mean, I'm in heaven on the stage. And the same in the recording studio, because I know what I'm doing in there and I really enjoy it. So, of course it's work, of course it's my profession, but thank God I love my profession. I love my profession, I love what I do. Yeah, maybe it's a bit of hard work, but it didn't hurt anybody as long as you don't do too much of it. You know, I play hard too, you know, so it's all right. As I said, it's the airports, the delays, you know, the journeys from the airports to the hotels, the monotony, the feeling that, you know, everything sort of starts looking the same. Really, truly, the only thing that saves it is walking on that stage, and that's the audiences are different every night, and that really is the saving grace. It's the payoff when you go on the boards. I just have to somehow minimise that travel, that kind of the monotony of it, because I don't ever want to appear bored. And I stopped doing those sports halls before I got bored. I knew I was starting to get it, but no one ever saw it because I never actually got bored. No, it's not really about being diplomatic. They've got their pluses and minuses everywhere you go. The Italians, for example, are very passionate about it, and they get very emotional about it right from the beginning. Whereas the Germans, for example, are quite attentive and quiet, and they're considered in a way, and they respond at the end of the songs, and they don't make huge amounts of unnecessary noise. They really get into the music. The Americans are sort of whoop whoop party party party, and it's just like, they're also very, very responsive. And I suppose really the Americans are really the party people of the world. I think they really know how to get down. And again, the English has a different thing because I'm English, and so you have the patter and the banter in between songs that you don't get anywhere else. So each place, even the Japanese are they're very sweet the way they do, they kind of sway from side to side and kind of clap and bob their heads, and they get into it in a completely different way, and I love that as well. So it's not being overly diplomatic. There's actually just endearing things in every audience. You get used to it. You feel sometimes a little bit like a goldfish in a bowl, but you just get used to it. You have to deal with it. If you couldn't deal with it, you'd go mad. So I try and be patient, which is difficult for me because I'm bloody impatient. But I try my best, and it's actually in many respects, it's helped me as a character to just have more tolerance and patience with people. Sometimes my patience runs out, and I'm sorry for that. It, in some ways, has been quite a help for me. Well, as I said, I try my best to be polite, and generally I find that people are very understanding and very kind, and they don't want to disturb you for too long. If they want an autograph or a picture or something, I do try to oblige. Sometimes I say no because it's my right to say no. If I choose to not do it, that's my business, and I probably have a good reason for doing it. I might be preoccupied with something else. Generally, people are very, very nice to me. I think I make friendly music, so I would imagine that, it would be listened to by friendly people, hopefully. I think he'd probably think I was too mellow. He'd probably think that the music's probably too safe if I were to criticise it. But I'd say that also I had an ear for melody when I was a kid, and I think I've written some very strong melodies, and I've written some good words. So I'd say generally, as a whole, I'd probably be more proud than ashamed. I've got a lot more to be proud of than I have to be ashamed of, certainly. Hi, this is Mick from Simply Red, and I hope you enjoy this single from my new album, Blue.